What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Joe.
Joe, this was a great episode. We recapped the Darlington race, the Truex domination, the throwback. It was really a good time. I thought Fox did a good job with the race coverage. We also got into Dover, which I really feel like is going to be it's a tough slate. DraftKings gave us a tough slate, but we really break it all down in this episode. I think the folks are really going to enjoy it. But really the most important thing that we talked about was that there's still a week left to enter for their chance to win a 2021 box of Donruss Racing
Hobby Box. We had a lot of engagement last week. If we can get to 200 subscribers here on YouTube, which we're close to doing, we'll be giving both of them away, and we'll tell you how in the video. But let's get on with it.
Before we get into Darlington review and before we start talking about Dover, which I think is going to be a really interesting slate this week, I want to give a huge shout out to all of you guys out there. Last week was one of the best weeks for the channel. We had some guys that you wanted to kind of mention really kind of hit it out of the park, and that feels great for us. You know, that's why we started doing this, is to kind of help you guys out there. And man, I really enjoyed last week overall.
It was a lot of fun last week. I'm glad we had a lot of participants getting the word out, and some guys actually taking home some decent-sized wins, some solid wins, Patreon members at that, which is always great to see. Flash that you on Twitter. Thanks for shouting us out with your
Absolutely.
winning. You had a $250 take home in one contest last week. He's been following us for a few weeks now and really putting some solid lineups together. It's awesome to see. We also had Spencer Williams on Twitter, and also another Patreon subscriber. He hit a nice lineup last week too. We love to see the wins. Every time we see this, it makes us feel great because our content is relevant. We like to see that. So the feedback and everything is great. We started off the episode, want to say thank you because it's a huge part of how we continue this growth, and we're super excited to see that.
Yeah, and at the pace that we're going, I think we might hit that 200 subscriber mark here on YouTube and get to give both of these boxes away, which we're both really excited about. And we're going to be doing that at COTA next week. We're really excited about that.
Yeah, with COTA action next week, we're going to be live from the track multiple times and then putting together some relative content for DraftKings and just have some fun with it. So we're really excited, want to give both these away, and it's simple to do. Head over to Twitter, make sure that you like, subscribe, and here as well. So we really are excited to see if we can't hit that 200 mark to give both these things away.
Absolutely. But how did your Darlington lineups shake out last week?
Mine weren't that great. It's probably one of my less or lacking weeks that I've had so far. It wasn't the greatest, but whenever Truex dominated the way he did, you really had to have some solid exposure to him to really take home some solid paydays. And we saw some of our followers did it, but unfortunately I didn't have too much exposure to Truex. I did have quite a bit, but it just wasn't with the right combinations. My Blaney pick helped me cash a decent bit of lineups, but just not enough to make it a solid payday. How about yourself?
Yeah, I was looking real good in the 22-22 lineup. I was holding down first for a good portion of the first and second stage. I had, everyone who saw the video last week, they know I was big on Larson. We both were, gave him 10s in our impact score. And as I was building lineups on Sunday before the race, I built a lot of them, Larson lineups in my GPP lineup builds. With my single entries and my higher tickets, I just decided, I think I just went with Truex for some reason, and that paid out. I think in the contest I just told you about, I think it was Hamlin and Truex was my combo, which was pretty good. The thing that ended up hurting was really late in the race. Jones had the tire issue. I think it was spun out or blew the tire a couple laps down. Still had a good day, but I mean, he was starting to threaten top 10. So all the, my lineup was looking really good there. And then also had Christopher Bell, and he was looking really good. I also had a single between him, like a head-to-head bet between him and Ryan Blaney. And that was, he was right behind him late in the race. And then Blaney got in the wall a little bit, went a couple spots back. I'm like, all right, I'm going to cash both that. And lineup's looking good. And then Christopher Bell had to pit late with the tire going down. So still positive on the day, which was much needed. The last couple of weeks were kind of slow bleeds, but you're going to have that in this sport. And, with this week coming up, which we'll get to here in a minute, I think strategy is going to be really, really big here because DraftKings did not give us any favors here. But are you surprised that Truex dominated the way that he did?
Yeah, it's really one of the first races all year where we've seen a true dominator, because we've seen
Larson at Atlanta, I think it was,
but he didn't win.
But he's had a ton of performance points.
Yeah, exactly. So from the NASCAR angle, the NASCAR perspective, it was a true domination, and you can look at that from the DK angle too, and he really ran away with it. He had 89.9 total performance points. The next guy on the list was Brad Keselowski with 13. Complete and utter domination from that team the entire day. So was very. It wasn't, I guess, surprising. They already have multiple wins on the season going into this. So to see him win and put it all together, that's really not too surprising. But in the fashion and how dominating he was, I didn't expect it so early on, and from them specifically. You had mentioned that you kind of went overboard on Truex. I was more overexposed on Kevin Harvick, and it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't the greatest day by any means, and it wasn't a beneficial way to do it compared to what we saw you obviously sticking there towards the top in some of those big contests.
Yeah, it's going to play out that way sometimes. You never know how these races are going to go, and that's what makes this sport and DFS in particular just so unique compared to the other sports. I think that's just crazy. 89.9 performance points from Truex, and then Brad, who did not have a good PD day and was not good overall, but he only got 13.6. You don't normally see that, but I feel like there's not many drivers other than Truex in the last 4 or 5 years who can just dominate a race the way that he seems to do. I think Coke 600, I believe it was a couple years ago, I think he led 395 laps out of 400 or something ridiculous like that. When he's dialed in, you ain't touching him.
And it gets scary this week with Dover, and it being a strategic position. I guess really from the beginning you want to have track position, and if he's up front, this could be something that we're talking about here in a minute. He could be one of our favorite plays, and it's going to be difficult to kind of make an argument for anybody else last week on who really made progress and whatnot. Is it William Byron having another top 10? That was a huge thing. There's a couple guys that did make solid, quiet, I guess, steps forward. And is there anybody besides like William Byron that stuck out to you last week that might have taken a little bit more of a step or put himself in a better position heading into this part of the season?
I like what William Byron is doing. I really do. Obviously, Larson, he wasn't having much really good success overall in the 750 package, but now he looked good. He was the only one late in the race who was able to give Truex a run for his money. And we're at 750 again this week. So, Larson, I think he's in contention a little bit more. He's not just the 550 guy. Even though the results didn't show it last week, Logano, he had raced his way up to like third or fourth before his speeding on pit road. He's been really good on the 750s, and I know he'll get dialed in on the 550 as well. I don't think as a season though, I don't know if, from my point of view, I don't know if we really learned anything about what we're going to see late in the year. Truex already had 2 wins, like you mentioned. So the fact that he won and dominated is not that surprising. It really isn't. If you've watched the sport long enough, you know that those are going to happen from time to time. I really don't understand why everyone was complaining on Twitter after the race. I thought it was a great race. I mean, you don't normally see those cars that sideways all race long. I mean, Truex was pedaling that car late in the race. I mean, he touched the wall, I think, a couple times and within the last 5 laps. That's pretty scary if you're the leader, with Larson kind of breathing down your neck. So for me, I don't think I really learned anything super helpful for late in the year other than Truex, I think, maybe just elevated himself as the front-running favorite for the championship because he's got 2 more wins than anybody else.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how everything kind of plays out. I know one thing that we try to do every week after a race is go back through the data and kind of see how our lineup stacked up and where we could have made some difference or different plays or made some changes and our strategy or an approach. So we put out a slate review on our Patreon every week after the race. So that's available to you. It's free right now, but eventually we'll put it behind the paywall. It's going to be a Patreon exclusive content eventually, but it is great for going and seeing performance points, the place differential, even the guys that were 5x value. It just really allows you to see the better picture of what transpired. Optimal lineup is also in there. That's something I wanted to talk to you about briefly, Jeremy. It was Martin Truex Jr. obviously was the guy to have in last week at Darlington. Kyle Busch surprisingly was in there. Ryan Blaney, Ryan Newman, Chase Briscoe, and Chris Buescher. So those guys down towards the bottom were kind of surprising. Chris Buescher had a solid starting position, and he performed well, which allowed him to have that great finishing position. He didn't have a ton of place differential, but that solid place finish
was the lower price tag.
Absolutely, that was the key there. Chase Briscoe in a similar situation, but he actually had a solid place differential day too, which was really nice to see from that team and from him specifically being a rookie. He was able to get the second highest place differential out of anybody behind Larson last week with 11 spots gained.
Briscoe was the most surprising, and I forget exactly what happened, but he had a weird sort of pit strategy that played out, and he was able to stay on the lead lap, whereas a lot of guys had already fallen off. So, and when he had track position, he did maintain it, and he has shown improvement over the last couple of weeks, which is obviously encouraging for that team and confidence in being able to play him in different situations from the DraftKings angle. So he was probably the biggest surprise to me because, I mean, we didn't really expect that from him. Ryan Newman, I actually was pretty high on personally. I forget what I gave him on the impact, but I did like his starting position and his experience there. And I'm like, well, as long as he just doesn't get in the wall or get in anyone's trouble or anyone else's trouble, I think he'd be good. And then Chris Buescher, obviously, he was a tough play because of the starting position, but I actually had him in some lineups as well. So really, for me, the only one that was kind of really two was Briscoe and Blaney, because Blaney just didn't have. I mean, from my point of view, I did watch the race. He never looked like the car. Of course, no one did compared to Truex. He just had a solid day, and because Truex took away so many performance points from like a Denny Hamlin, a Kyle Larson, Harvick and whatnot, I think that's kind of how he made the optimal, plus the PD really did help. So that was a little surprising, but obviously when you're talking about Penske equipment and Blaney, having a good run somewhere is not that shocking.
Yeah, it wasn't too surprising. Last week I think we talked about it where he was kind of our biggest it was the biggest difference in impact score we'd had all season was Ryan Blaney last week between you and I was higher on him than you, and I saw the place differential. That's the only route, and him being a little bit more solid this week. He made the optimal, but it was kind of a backdoor. It wasn't a dominating factor or anything along those lines. He really didn't have any performance points except for 2.25, which really isn't that impactful, but he snuck his way in.
Yeah, there's the PD. I mean, because you look at it, normally you don't see two guys with only just a touch above 5x value make an optimal. But when someone hits 13.39 value, that's Truex, obviously, you're going to have some lower value guys. So, if Kyle Busch or someone else leads a bunch of laps, gets those fastest laps, I don't think Blaney makes it. I think he's getting kicked out. So, but kudos to you and anyone of you out there who played Blaney. It obviously helped you out as long as you had Truex. If you didn't have Truex, it didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
It really
at all.
didn't.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting week, but we learned some more. We have some more data to build off of headed into Dover because this is a 750 horsepower race as well. We are going to kind of, I guess, dive into Dover if you don't have anything else you want to talk about at Darlington. It was a fun, exciting weekend.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed the race. It's always cool seeing the throwback paint schemes. There's some good-looking cars out there. Like I said earlier, there's really not too much that I personally took from it for the season. So I say let's get into Dover. It is similar to Darlington, but the track shape is different, and it's only a mile. And this is another 400-mile race, but with it being a mile, that means there's 400 laps. So we're in a very similar situation as we were last week. Performance points.
It's going to be key. There's a lot available this week compared to most weeks because we do have those 400 laps. So we're going to have to take in fastest laps more so, and the amount of laps led. Those are going to be really big metrics that are measured this week. So you really want to find that dominator again this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And the stages, they're a little longer too, 120 in the first and second stage. And the last stage, you get 160 laps. And the last time we were here, Kevin Harvick won, and he did dominate. And that was when I think they were doing a invert, and he still dominated. I think he led like 200-something, 300 laps. We'll see if he can duplicate that this year. A little bit of a tough task. But one little note, Justin Haley was supposed to be on the slate. You'll see him as you're building lineups, and it'll say out because he was it COVID, I think.
He was one of the COVID impacted drivers. So Josh Berry will be taking his spot in the 77 ride this week, which is going to be a little bit different, but it'll be cool to see him get a cup ride for a chance at a awesome race at Dover.
Yeah, tough spot to make your cup debut, and also tough equipment to make your cup debut. I think Justin Haley's a pretty solid driver, and he has struggled this year, but I really like Josh Berry. Obviously, I'm not going to be playing him a lot. I mean, you got to understand the equipment that he's in, but if you've been watching Xfinity at all, he had a tough start to the season, but he won Martinsville, a place that he races at a lot in the normal series that he runs. So that was it was really cool to see him. Already kind of got a good little fan base behind him. He's racing for Junior Motorsports. That number 8 car is not supposed to be in there the whole season, so his season this year is starting to wind down. I don't know if he's going to get any more cup opportunities, but he's aggressive. He's good on short tracks. I think he potentially might get a little bit more out of that car this week than what we've been seeing out of Haley. Only time will tell. But just a special note, so we did kind of update our impact score and projections to reflect Josh Berry versus Justin Haley.
Yeah, it's not every week you get something like this last second, so it's good that we were able to get this in there and let you know. Like we talked about just a little bit earlier in our podcast, the track position is going to be really big this week. Strategy is going to be something I think we should talk about before we dive into the player pool, because we were alluding to wanting to find those dominators, and the best drivers this week, the guys that have had the fastest cars this year, and where all the data points are at the top of the slate. So it's going to be very difficult to figure out who we're wanting to play in this. But again, strategy, we got to have the right combination. What are you thinking strategy-wise? Whenever we're looking at potentially maybe a driver falling back, there's time to make it up, but it's going to be hard passing. There's a lot of stuff to take into consideration.
Yeah, and obviously we're recording this before Tech, so we don't know if any of these big-name drivers, Truex, Larson, Hamlin, the guys that are the most expensive drivers, we don't know if they're going to have to start from the rear. there's plenty of time to make it up, and if they're fast, they can certainly do it, because I think the competition cautions at like lap 35, I think, in this race.
I believe so.
So there's time to make it up. But that would, I think, compared to most weeks, I think that would kind of hinder me a little bit wanting to use them. I would definitely reduce ownership in some of these GPPs because that's going to be tough. We'll see what happens there. Obviously, we don't know. But this track it's a mostly single lane groove, so making passes can be difficult. That's why, like you mentioned earlier, track position is key. And
it's going to be hard to find place differential guys that are going to have the equipment, the ability, and the time to make it up towards the front, because you'll see cars going a lap down pretty quick. And that's something to consider when you're looking at the bottom of the player pool. And we really won't be diving into the bottom of the player pool too much today, because we're really going to have a fine, balanced stack of these mid-tier drivers with the right combination of the guys up at the top.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this earlier. I think this is a week in particular where you really need to know what kind of DFS player you are. If you got a large bankroll, have at it, max out the 150, get as many different combos as you can. Or if you really feel strong about Larson or Truex this week, build a lot of different combinations around them. But if you're a guy who's just kind of having some fun, this might be one of those weeks where you kind of just enjoy the race a little bit more.
And maybe not play as much.
Yeah, you just maybe go a little lighter, just have a few lineups for fun. Or, again, you just need to know yourself, because taking big swings at this late, obviously it can pay off. But like you said, I don't think that you can have a lineup with two $11,000 plus guys in it and end up doing that well. I just don't think it's going to work out in your favor this week. So learn, or make sure you know who you are as a DFS player, understanding your bankroll. If you do that, I think you'll be fine going into Coda, which I think Coda will give us an opportunity to really attack the slate a little bit more. The biggest difficulty with next week is going to be qualifying is a couple hours before the race, and that's obviously a big factor. But at least we'll have a little indication of where they may be because of practice, and then obviously just road course experience. But yeah, this week is a week that I may even play a little less, just because I think it's going to be tough.
It will definitely be tough. DraftKings did a great job this week of really making it difficult based on starting position, salary, and then just knowing that this is a track position track, and that these guys that are starting in the back, it's going to be interesting to see if one or two of them can find their way up towards the front and be a GPP takedown busting opportunity for us. But jumping into it, I think starting at the top, Martin Truex and Kyle Larson, we both talked about them already. Martin Truex has got 3 wins after last week. He's dominated last week. There's a reason he's 11,900 starting first on the poll. He's got a straight shot to dominate again. It's a track that could kind of fit to him too. But what's your thoughts this week on Truex?
Well, it's similar to Darlington. He's got good stats here. It's a good style of track for him. If they can come with the right setup, it could be another Truex show. He's shown that he's been really good. He's at the top of the leaderboard as far as 750 performance overall. Denny Hamlin is right there too with him. Larson's kind of the odd duck out when you kind of single out 750s, but like I mentioned earlier, he's based on last week. He raced his way up to Truex's bumper before he kind of burned up his tires. So all of these guys, in my opinion, they're the same but different. Do you like going with Truex back-to-back weeks? Normally we don't see that, but we've seen that some last year with Hamlin and Harvick. So it's certainly possible. Or do you say, look, Larson's got good track position, whereas he had issues. He's starting 14th last week, and then I think he had a pit penalty or something like that. So he raced his way up to the front, and then he had an issue and kind of go back. So he passed a lot of cars overall, more than just the place differential would indicate. So maybe Larson's he's kind of in that unique situation. And then Hamlin, he's been the best guy consistently all year. He doesn't have quite the top 10 numbers that actually Harvick and Byron have, but his average finish is better. He's had races where he's dominated, and this is a good track for him as well. So I have a really tough time picking this week between Truex, Larson, and Hamlin. I think you decide how many you're going to build, and then you just build other guys around them, and that's how you run it. I don't think you can stack any of those guys together.
Yeah, and I don't know if it makes sense because I think one of them truly has the potential to dominate this race, because once you get out, this is a difficult place to pass at, because like you said earlier, there's really one groove that really sticks, and then some of these guys that have different styles of racing, they'll go try to find grooves that are outside the norm, but that's risky, and it also isn't always a guaranteed success to get around this place. Truex, in my opinion, is somebody starting up at the front. Him and Hamlin, I think, really stand out to me. Larson's right there, but to me, the 550 horsepower, or the 750 horsepower hasn't been the best. We've seen Truex and Hamlin really stand out in this package, so I'm a little bit more there, but Larson's been so good and so consistent, it's hard not to want to play him, and I think it's going to be a very difficult time this week to figure out, hey, do you lean more heavy on one driver or the other? Again, this is why I think we talked about kind of maybe either going really heavy this week or going a little bit light, because it's going to be difficult, because the guys below him, there's a handful of drivers that we're about to talk about that could bring some value, that have had fast cars, and Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski.
Before we get there, just so that way we kind of paint the picture for everyone, when we look at the last 6 races here at Dover, Truex, and we sort it by driver rating, Truex is second, Kyle Larson is third. Now, Kyle Larson didn't race last year, so he's got a 4-race sample size in this stat sheet. And then Hamlin's fifth. So second, third, and fifth best drivers according to driver rating. The only guy who's better than them is Harvick, and we're going to talk about him here in a minute. We've kind of been saying the same thing about Harvick all year now, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, Truex has a win, Larson has a win, and Hamlin has a win within these last 6 races. That's why they're the 3 most expensive drivers, and they're all running really good this year. So, yeah, you're going to have to just diversify, and, again, just decide how you want to play. You're going to go light or you're going to go heavy, and then diversify from there. And
one thing I wanted to point out, too, is in the 750 horsepower stats between those 3 drivers this year, Truex has 3 wins, 4 top 5s. Hamlin has 5 top 5 in these 5 races so far.
Yeah, and we're excluding the dirt race in that.
And Kyle Larson has 2 top 5s in this package. So that's why I think he's been putting better the races together better and more consistent the last couple times in this package, so we could see him potentially pop. But that's why I'm a little bit higher on the other 2.
Yeah, I don't fault you there at all. But you're going to need guys to stack with them, and then that brings us into the 10K tier, and then the 2 high-priced 9K guys. I think they're all kind of similar. Chase Elliott has had some really good, strong runs here, and then he's also had some runs not so good. He's a little bit higher price than what I'd like to pay for him, but I think he could be a sneaky play where he might actually be the guy that dominates this race. He's capable of that. Brad's going to offer you the PD upside that you're not getting from the guys above him or even the guys below him, so he's kind of a PD play. I do kind of like him there. If we're talking about just those 2, do you lean more Chase with the track position, or do you lean more Brad with the PD upside?
100% Chase Elliott. I think this week is an opportunity to grab him at maybe a little bit lower ownership. We've been saying this for a couple weeks, but he's starting 8th, and Brad Keselowski's starting 15th. Again, this is a track that's difficult to pass at, and Brad Keselowski's average finish is almost 12th in a 750 horsepower setup. So to me, I think he's more risky. because Chase Elliott has a better path to and less cars to pass to be able to get those performance points that we need at that price tag. So I think based on that alone, I'm definitely higher on Chase than Brad this week.
But if Chase kind of runs where he starts, which he's kind of done some this year, and Brad's able to crack top 10, maybe even touch top 5, that's where you need to go. But I lean Elliott a little bit more than Brad this week as well. To me, when we go down to Kyle Busch starting 6th, I think kind of similar to last week. I don't know if he really has the path to value, and then somehow he ended up in the optimal. And he's starting a little further back, so there's a little PD upside. But he really hasn't been – he doesn't have the Kyle Busch stats that we would normally see from him at a lot of other tracks. I mean, he is the 6th best driver according to driver rating, but he's only got 1 top 5 in the last 6. That's not good. 4 top 10s, which is not bad, but an average finish of 12.2. Are you going to be high on Kyle Busch this week? You going to sprinkle him in? You going to just risk it and fade him?
Well, starting 6th, I think you can sprinkle him in and have some exposure to him because he can find a way to lead and find some performance points. But in the 750 horsepower package that they're running, I don't think he's got the success that some of these other drivers do. And then Kevin Harvick's really solid here at this track, and he's priced right below him.
You can say that.
And that's where I think a lot of people will be in a cash environment. And so Kyle Busch is a great, I guess, opportunity to maybe find to be different in a GPP tournament, and just a great way to look at it versus Kevin Harvick. I think they're very similar in price and stats and some of that stuff that people might see, and just want to be able to go ahead and grab Kyle Busch in a GPP environment, not so much in the cash.
Yeah, when we kind of compare Kyle Busch to Harvick in the 750s this year, Harvick driver rating wise is a little bit better than Busch. Busch does have a top 5, whereas Kevin Harvick doesn't. Kevin Harvick has 4 top 10s, and Busch has 3 out of those 5 races that we were talking about earlier. But man, when you start looking at Dover, Kyle Busch isn't bad, but Harvick in the last 6, his average finish is 3.3 with 2 wins and 5 top 5s.
And when you dive into their career stats and out of the active driver list, Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick are both on the all-time win list with 4. Truex is also there. So those 3 guys that we've been talking about, they've got success here, and it's came often. There is another driver on the list that has 4 wins here that's a little bit surprising, and that's Ryan Newman. So just something to consider with some of this track history, and these guys kind of being similarly priced with Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick. They've got 4 wins here.
You know, when you kind of mention those guys, to me, it's like those are tough guys. You got to be a tough guy, a tough driver to be good at this track. And some of these other guys, some of these drivers, we don't see it, and that's why we don't see the performance. But I think this is a good week to play Harvick. I was kind of like you. I had a decent amount of them last week, and it looked good there super early. He led like 10 laps, and I'm like, all right, this is starting to really pay off. And then drifted back, and then kind of raced his way back up there. Solid day for the team. They're making improvements. And if those guys above him, starting above him, the ones we've already talked about, if they just miss the setup just a little bit and Harvick's right on, this could be the Harvick show. And to get him less than $10,000, I think that's another good value, but it's not like what we had last year with Harvick. And obviously, that's why he's not priced super high. So risky. I'd say it's like a moderate risk. I think you're going to get decent value out of him regardless. I don't see him finishing 15th or worse unless, of course, there's an accident. So Harvick, in my opinion, is really one of my favorite plays when you take away those obvious dominators. That's kind of where I'm thinking about going. How about you?
You mentioned favorite plays. I think the next guy is probably my favorite play on the entire slate, Joey Logano. $9,500, so he offers a little bit of salary relief compared to the guys up there. Starting ninth, he offers place differential, but he's not too far in the mix of bad cars where he's going to get caught up in anything typically. So he's been really fast in the 750 package. A lot of things really align for Joey Logano this week from that the data is pointing at. He's solid here from a NASCAR angle as well. It's going to be very interesting to see how much ownership he does draw. But I think he is my favorite play in a cash game scenario this week.
I can see that. I like Logano a lot too, and I'm probably gonna try to fit him in a little higher ownership than what I went with him last week, because he did race his way up to, I think I said third or fourth before the speeding penalty on pit road that put him, I believe, into 2 laps down, I think is what it was, by the time he serviced his penalty. Not in my opinion, not great stats, but not terrible stats here in the last 6. I mean, an average finish of 11.8, only 1 top 5, but 4 top 10s. There's definitely value upside there, and he has the potential to get out front and lead laps. We know that. This is the case with him just about any track. And with that price tag, it's really enticing. And I think he's probably going to go a little lower ownership because, we get into the guy here in a second, Alex Bowman below him starting 16th. That's where I think a lot of other guys are going to want to start going to, and for good reason with him as well. But I completely agree with you with Logano. I think he's in a good spot, in a sneaky spot where maybe he's lower owned than he should be.
Yeah, and I alluded to his 750 horsepower package. He's third in driver rating with an average finish of 5.2 in this configuration. So something to consider. He's got quite a few average fastest laps and laps led in this package as well. I think it's just a spot where you can get some solid value out of Joey Logano.
And Penske, just overall, they've been good just about everywhere they've gone. Maybe not every driver. I mean, Brad really struggled last week, more so than I thought he would. I'm not surprised that he drifted back, but to finish 24th after starting on the pole and leading a few laps, that was surprising. Ryan Newman had a pretty good day. Ryan Blaney, sorry. And then Logano, like I said, he was up there too until just the penalty. And it wasn't anything car related. It's just Logano's foot related, and he can fix that. So I agree. I think when you factor all those things in, it's a very solid play.
You mentioned Alex Bowman. He's next, 9,200, starting 16th. He really offers a lot of place differential in a spot that there's not a lot of guys that have that right medium between being stuck in traffic and then having to deal with all the passing and everything. He's right there where he's not in the mix of a whole bunch of bad cars, and he has a path to be able to potentially reach some solid value with place differential, and he's been fast this year.
Well, you say that, but then I've actually heard several drivers talk about when you get into about that 14th to 21st range, all those guys have very similar cars, I guess you could say, and they say they race so hard it's almost worse than when you're up front or in the back. So he's not out of the woods in that regards, because there's going to be some good guys. I mean, he's going to be starting right next to Brad Keselowski. But I think this will end up being a good day for Hendrick Motorsports overall. I like all their drivers. I think all their drivers are in decent spots. But I think as people build their lineups, let's say you take someone off that top tier, that 11K, you're going to go with someone between Elliott and Logano as probably your next potential dominator. So then that third guy's got to be either Alex Bowman, Kurt Busch, or Amarola. It's got to be a PD guy. Alex Bowman doesn't have the PD upside that those other two do, but if he gets a solid top 10, which he's certainly capable of, that's going to be enough points to help you out.
And these other two guys you mentioned, Kurt Busch and Eric Almirola. Kurt Busch really hasn't had the greatest equipment in 750 horsepower packages.
I think it's just more finishes, though. I think he's been getting – sorry to cut you off, but he was doing good last week. He was on the move, and then he got Bubba. So that's going to happen. I don't know if it's necessarily performance related with him. I think it's just results have been the issue with Kurt Busch. That's my opinion.
Speaking of results, Eric Almirola, somebody we kind of talked about for a while last week.
We nailed that one.
And that was bad to see him just completely destroyed within the first, dozen laps, it seemed like. So he finished really far back once again and finds himself starting 32nd. And it's just unfortunate they can't find their way out of this rut. It's very difficult and a challenging time for them. They need to put something together.
I want to actually thank Eric Almirola because I had a head-to-head bet between Eric Jones and him, and I picked Eric Jones, and I've never cashed a bet within the first 10 laps of a race before. So I want to thank him and whoever got him loose. I forget who that was. It might have been Bubba Wallace as well. I think he was in a couple of incidents. So I just want to give a shout out to them. But you're right. They have to get something going here. And personally, I think that they will. Almirola's had some good runs here. And he does okay when he has a bad result. He does fairly okay as far as the next race getting a better result. So I really like him this week. You get the most salary relief between him, Kurt Busch, and Alex Bowman. But by no means is this a lock because I just don't know if Almirola just is going to be an unlucky season for him or what, because it has not been good at all.
It hasn't been good, but I think this is a week where you can play him and feel a little bit more comfortable because he really can't do too much worse than he has. And so I think there's some solid value there. He's got hopefully he has some faster equipment than the guys in front of him, and that he will be able to gain a little bit of track position, which he doesn't need a ton to reach value. A top 18 finish will put you at 5x, and that's not even leading any laps or obviously at that position or fastest laps. That's not a bad day.
Well, and I know you didn't get to see all the race because you were out camping with the fam, but he was making his way through the field, and when they interviewed him after he got out of the infield care center or whatever, he was saying that they had a really fast car, one of the fastest that they've really had all year. So I think Stewart-Haas as a whole is making improvements. We saw starting to see better results obviously out of Harvick, Briscoe. Cole Custer's still kind of in that Almirola situation where he's just been having some bad luck as well. He basically had the same wreck that Almirola had coming off, I think it was turn 4, and hit the inside wall, and the front tires weren't even on the ground after he hit the either of their cars. Just incredible. But I think as a whole, they are bringing in faster cars, but because they've put themselves in such a hole, they're going to be starting in the back. And that's really tough at these short tracks to stay on the lead lap. You have to race aggressive right out of the gate because you go a lap down early here. Maybe you're lucky enough you can get the wave around. You're going to want tires almost every opportunity you can get. So there's not a lot of opportunities to get back on the lead lap here unless you're that lucky dog and get the right caution. So tough spot for Almirola on that team, but I think they'll have a much better day than they had last week.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a tough spot, but they should have the equipment, and maybe they have a little bit of luck this week to be able to make a solid finish. A couple guys we jumped over, William Byron, Ryan Blaney, two guys that are in the top 10 in the $8,000 range. Track position's key. These guys could hold the value to have strong, solid finishes, maybe get a couple fastest laps and laps led. That's some value that you need. I like William Byron a little bit. Just starting third's a little bit challenging. If he can maintain a solid finish, great, but he needs to lead some laps with that starting third. If he loses some positions, you could lose some of that value that you're needing. Ryan Blaney starting 7th, though. I've given him a score of 9 on our impact that we'll talk about in our race day rundown on Sunday morning. I like him with this price tag of $8,400. I think he's solid value, and he could potentially have a good, strong finish as well.
So the way I kind of look at this as I'm kind of breaking and sectioning off drivers, if you decide, well, you could go with one of those PD guys, and then maybe you don't go with the Elliott to Logano range. Maybe you do a Larson, skip over, you do let's say Kurt Busch, and then maybe you want another cheaper guy as a potential dominator. So I think William Byron and Blaney, they fall in the same sort of category this week. Blaney obviously has more of a PD upside. starting 7 versus 3rd. And I've given both of them an impact of 7, so you might think that they are the same to me, and that's why I just said what I said. However, if I'm picking between the two, I'm going to lean William Byron because he's got a little better track position. Maybe early on, maybe Truex and Hamlin get into it a little bit, or Larson, and I mean, who knows how the thing will play out. But Byron's had a lot of speed. He's been more consistent in the 750 package this year. And I think he's on a 9 or 10 race top 10 streak so far. And he's been doing it at very different tracks and challenging tracks. So this week, if I'm putting them head to head, if they do a head to head bet, and if the odds look good, I would lean Byron. But I don't fault you or anything like that for picking Blaney, because I think it's there too.
It is. It's one of those weeks where we're a little bit different on Blaney again. The reason I am so much higher on, or not that much higher, but a little bit more higher on Blaney, is that he's got 38.4 as an average lap led in this package versus William Byron's 1.8 this year. Also, average fastest laps, Ryan Blaney's got 10 versus William Byron's 7. A little bit different. Again, different style tracks, all that. It's just consideration in this year's package, but I think Blaney could have a better path to value, in my opinion. We'll just have to wait and see.
Right. That's what I say. I mean, to me, they're very similar. I lean Byron, you're lean Blaney. You guys, let us know who you pick.
Christopher Bell, $8,000 starting 11th, is a very interesting guy to talk about. I think we should just touch on him because we have him as one of our higher values. Guys below this are going to be really a lot in the same, I think. So he really stands out as somebody I like this week as a potential path to value.
I like Bell a lot. He's been very solid in the 750 package. Was running really strong last week until the tire issue late, which we talked about already, kind of hurt me in my lineups, but and I know a lot of other people as well. He was fairly popular. Decent track position. We know that he's going to be with, obviously, Adam Stevens, great crew chief. I think at this price tag, you need some value. There's not the PD upside, but sometimes you just need a solid finishing result. If he can race his way up 6th, 5th, something like that, heck, even 7th, he has potential to get over 6x value, and you're going to obviously need that. Cole Custer, we kind of already talked about. He's starting 30th. He's had 2 really good runs here. I think his average finish is like 10.5. So he really has a lot of upside. But similar to what I said about Amarola, I mean, you got to make sure you got a fast car right out of the gate. Because if you go a lap down before the comp caution, it's going to be a long day, and it's going to be hard for you to make value in your lineups if he only ends up finishing 25th or something.
Yeah, and I think that's why Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick are in the conversation this week, because they start in the top 15 and have a path to potential value by just having solid finishes. If they get top 10 finishes, it's a great day for those guys. If they even get in the top, or where they start almost, as long as they get a couple fastest laps, it's going to be a good day for them. So those 2 guys are guys in the middle priced range that I think could open up the door to some value as well.
I forget which race it was. I believe it was last year. Austin Dillon actually led some laps in one of these races, and I think it was a late pit penalty or something like that just got him behind late, and they just didn't have enough time. I mean, they still had a good finish. I think it was a top 15. I heard this on another podcast earlier this week, so it's not super fresh in my mind. Been a very long week. But regardless, I think RCR is going to have a good day overall. I think Reddick, he can kind of run the high line. He looked really good at Darlington for most of the race. He just kind of drifted back late. Not quite sure what that's about. Maybe it just didn't make the right adjustments. But man, I think he was threatening top 3 for a good portion of this race. So RCR, I think, the alliance that they've kind of formed with Hendrick and the Motors, they're showing up with fast cars. Dillon, for whatever reason, this is one of his pretty solid tracks here. So I'm in agreement. I think they're very similar plays, not just because they're starting next to one another practically and on the salary board next to one another, but just the equipment that they have and the types of drivers they are at this track. I think this could be a really good day for both of them.
I agree. I think Tyler Reddick, he does have a win here in the Truck Series. He's one of those guys that experiments with different grooves a little bit more so than some of the other drivers. I think he could find a way to make some passing that will allow him to move up a little bit. So a lot of the guys down below are really challenging this week to distinguish, but we'll try to break them down in our race day rundown on Sunday morning, give you the impact score related to them so you can kind of complete your build if you want to experiment with some of the guys below, because there's a couple of drivers that we'll touch on in the race day rundown that will allow you to have some salary relief.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts on Dover before we wrap this episode up? I mean, it's always a fun time when we go back to the Monster Mile. It's a good race.
Miles to Monster is going to be present, and it's going to be interesting to see which one of these drivers is, I guess, strong enough to take home the trophy after 400 miles. It's, I think, going to be one of those guys starting in the top 4 that we talked about extensively today. It's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it, and when we get to these mile short track racing, the action's going to be there. I'm super stoked.
I am as well. So, we got basically a week left until COTA. We're over 100 subscribers here on YouTube. We just need to get 200, and we can give both of these away. If we don't get there, that's okay. We're still giving one away. So make sure that you guys get in on the action. Click the Twitter link below for the tweet, and we'll post that. All you need to do is like, comment, and tag 3 of your friends, and then you're entered, and you get a free 2021 Donruss Hobby Box.
And like he said, if we get to 200 subscribers here on YouTube, then we're giving away both of these. So 2 of you could go home with a box of 2021 Donruss Racing Hobby. So if you want a chance to do that, head over to Twitter. Like he said, it's really easy to get entered. So make sure that you do that. Check out the other links below. We've got our race guide. That's a digital magazine that's full of all the content that we just really went over. Allows you to get a good visual perspective of some of the numbers that we talked about, and really just hopefully shed some light on some of the stuff in a nicer, prettier picture.
All right. This was a great episode, man. Let's send it off. I don't have anything else to say, so I'm Jeremy, and that's Joe. Good luck with your lineups.